Hello everyone. I am Dr. Susengfa Gugoi, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, North Lakhimpur College Autonomous. Welcome you all to your favorite channel, e-Politica. Everything that you want to know on political science. Today I'm here with you all with another module on political science titled as India and Cold War and Relevance of Non-Alignment Movement. This particular module is prepared in connection with the previous modules on Cold War era for the class 12 students, but it is also designed for the undergraduate and postgraduate students who are having international relations as one of the papers in political science, and for those who are preparing for NET and JRF examination as well as competitive examinations. The objective of today's module is to learn about the role of India during Cold War, to analyze the connection between India with NAM, to explain what are the criticism of India's policy of NAM, and to evaluate the relevance of NAM in 21st century. So this is the main object. These are the main objectives of today's module. Let us begin. Now, when we talk about India's role in Cold War, the two things that we need to talk about India's role in Cold War is that the role of India in Cold War was neither to be considered as active nor passive, because we have noticed that during the Cold War, India did not participate in any of the blocs directly or indirectly, which can facilitate or popularize Cold War in this part of Asia. Therefore, the leaders of India after the independence shows no interest in the power politics that was going on between USA and USSR. Therefore, what India had adopted during this period was a position of neutrality. So therefore, India maintains a equidistance from both of the poles without being interfering into the power dynamics that was going on between capitalist and communist bloc. And how that neutrality was being maintained by India, it was only possible through a medium called non-alignment movement. As you all know that countries from Latin America, Africa and Asia who have very recently got independent from the colonial masters, they shows no interest in participating in the world politics which was happening during the Cold War and after the Second World War. And it was only possible through a collective mechanism called non-alignment movement, or in short NAM. And India is also not exception, because the leader of India at that time was Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the pioneer of this particular campaign called NAM. So through NAM, India tried to participate, took part in Cold War and tried to maintain a balance of power between the two poles of the world. However, although India tried to maintain the neutrality via NAM, but critics mostly from Western country, they do criticize the role of India for using non-alignment movement or NAM as their foreign policy to capitalize the benefits from both of the blocs. So India's rule was therefore, it was in debate, because India was blamed for utilizing benefits from USA and USSR by capitalizing a foreign policy called non-alignment. Now, before we talk about other details, let us now discuss what role has been played by India in non-alignment movement. Now, as you all know that the very idea of NAM was been popularized by some key figures, and among them one of the key figures was from India, was the then Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So it was Nehru who have given or who had stepped the first stone for the non-alignment campaign. So the idea of NAM from Nehru perspective implies three things. First, non-entering into a military alliances. That means that during the Cold War, the world was divided into segregations, and both of the blocs tried to popularize or to sign certain military alliances. For example, you can talk about NATO, for example, Warsaw Pact. So Nehru, by applying non-alignment policy for India, he was assuming that India should not participate in any of these military alliances. This is number one. Number two, India should act as per its own self-judgment. So by adopting non-alignment movement, Nehru was actually hoping that India would participate in Cold War period, and while participating, they will not be pressurized, or they will not allow the other countries to pressurize the foreign policy decisions of India. So it was entirely the decision of its own country. That means there has to be self-judgment to be made by India regarding how to play a role during the Cold War. So it was also being used through NAM. And the third thing which has been implied by Nehruvian idea of NAM was maintenance of friendly relationship. Because India already had a very a history of turmoil, or you can say that crisis, with the existing government of the British. So therefore, India do not want to maintain a hostile relationship with the neighboring countries, and in general, and more, generally, or with other countries of the world. So therefore, India, by adopting non-alignment campaign, actually trying to establish a friendly relationship with other countries as well. However, by and large, when we talk about the idea of NAM from an Indian perspective, it was adapted to achieve two things. Number one, staying away from the two allies. So India was actually applying non-alignment movement because India wanted to maintain a equidistance from both of the blocs, whether it is USA or USSR. And secondly, India tried to raise voice through non-alignment movement to the newly emerged countries who were being pressurized to become a part of these alliances. So India do not afford or do not want to encourage the countries who have been newly emerged or newly independent to participate in any of the blocs. So that is why they will always become vocal about the sovereignty and independence of this newly emerged country without being aligning to any of these blocs. Now, when you talk about India's role in NAM, one person who played a very interesting role was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He, in fact, was the most important personalities who have evolved the idea of non-alignment movement. It was indeed said that it was Nehru who actually described, refined, and popularized the concept of non-alignment. How? We can take certain examples. It was noticed that before the independence of India on March 1947, under the auspices of Nehru, there was a conference organized in New Delhi. The name of the conference was Asian Relations Conference, and this conference was being instrumental for bringing unity among the Asian nations. So this conference was actually organized to bring the Asian nations to come together. Not only that, Nehruvian concept of Panchashil was also accepted as the core principle of NAM. So this is very interesting. Now, what was that five principle or Panchashil? That by Panchashil, Nehru was actually hoping for peaceful coexistence among the countries. Now, the five principles are, for example, mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, mutual non-aggression, mutual non-interference, equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. So these principles were together known as Panchashil, and later we have noticed that in the Bandung Conference of 1955, these principles were treated as the core value of non-alignment campaign. And it was very interesting that even in the 2019 18th NAM summit, these principles were considered to be the principle to resolve the global crisis that was happening today. So it shows that India indeed had a very important role to play in non-alignment movement. Now, India actually used the non-alignment movement for certain reasons. One of the important reasons why India was in favor of non-alignment movement was to soften the Cold War rivalry. It was noticed that during the Cold War, there was a serious rivalry between two alliances. So India want to soften this rivalry. India want to cool down this rivalry that is going on between USA and USSR. And the leaders of India and the diplomats that try, enough to mediate between these two rival groups. For example, here we can talk about Korean War, where the Indian diplomats played a very important role in mediating the Korean crisis between North Korea and South Korea. Not only that, during this particular time, by the medium of non-alignment movement, India also tried to activate the regional and international organizations which were not part of any of the alliances, whether it was led by USA or USSR. So India tried to reactivate them. So non-alignment movement was therefore used as an organization by which the coordination between the Asian countries, Latin American countries could be framed. Therefore, India has a more cooperative kind of a framework to NAM. So NAM was actually used for a cooperative juncture, so that the countries of Latin America, Asia, and Africa can come together and fight back the neo-colonialism. So this was the role of India during NAM. But although India had played a very important role in utilizing the idea of NAM, but the role of India was also been criticized on many grounds. The first ground why the India's policy of NAM was criticized is to be a policy of NAM of India to be criticized as unprincipled. Now, why do we consider India's NAM policy as unprincipled? Because although India was talking about maintenance of peaceful coexistence or mutual cooperation, but in principle, it was noticed that India was completely reluctant to participate on the current world affairs that was happening during this particular time. So India did not make a very strong standpoint or opinion regarding most of the crises that happened during the Cold War. So it shows that as an idea of mediation or non-aligning, the Indian principle of non-alignment is not clear. So this is number one. Secondly, India was also criticized for being double standard. Now, what is this double standard? In one way, the leaders of India had adopted non-alignment movement for, leading those countries who have newly emerged for not to participate in any of the connections with other countries. So India was actually encouraging the other member countries of non-alignment movement not to make any kind of tie-up with any of this bloc. So that was theoretically India has done that, but in practice it was noticed that India had signed, developed certain relationship with both of the parties. And here we can take an example. In the year 1971, the government of India had signed a treaty with USSR. The name of the treaty was the Treaty of Friendship, and that Treaty of Friendship was signed with USSR for 20 years. So it shows that there was a double standard adopted by India. In one hand, the leaders of India were encouraging the other countries not to participate, not to align with any of the blocs, and in another, individually India was making treaties with the alliances. So it shows that there was a double standard. So India's policy of NAM was therefore criticized. Number three, after the end of Cold War, when there was no option for India to relying on USSR because it was got collapsed, so India had adopted another foreign policy which was known as look is policy. Now looking is policy, look is policy. So what is look is policy? Look is policy is basically a foreign policy adopted by government of India to depending on the Eastern or Southeast Asian countries. I mean, now India is not looking at the West. Now India is looking at the East. So that Eastern alliance is also one of the classical example that India is actually not been, adopting the principle of non-alignment movement now. So it was very contradictory according to critics. That in one hand, India was actually talking about self-judgment, independent kind of a foreign policy. In another, India has now looking at it, or depending on certain segments of the country. So this was also been criticized by many people regarding India's policy of NAM. Now, let us now talk about what is the relevance of NAM in 21st century. We have already talked about the role of India and its criticism. Now we will talk about the relevance of NAM as a campaign or as a foreign policy in 21st century. Now we know that in 1989, when USSR got collapsed, after 1990, there was an end of Cold War. Now when the Cold War was ended, there was a question among all the, policymakers, foreign policy analysts, and also the political scientists, that whether NAM is relevant in 21st century. Because many people believe that the very idea of NAM was actually associated with the idea of Cold War. And NAM was actually created in order to making a balance of power for those countries who are economically poor, and to provide them a bargaining capacity. And when there is no Cold War, whether NAM is relevant. So there is both support and opposition to these questions. Some of the people do accept that NAM is still relevant. Some people find many loopholes or weakness inside the NAM campaign, so they find it more irrelevant. Here I would like to quote what the former Foreign Secretary J.N. Dixit said. According to J.N. Dixit, NAM's, I quote, NAM's relevance has eroded because its fundamental terms of reference have become obsolete, I unquote. Now, what Dixit said that the very idea of NAM has got irrelevant now. Why? Because the fundamental terms of reference. What is the fundamental terms of reference? The fundamental terms of reference of NAM was Cold War. Since Cold War is not there, therefore, according to Dixit, NAM is also become irrelevant. Therefore, many critics they believe that NAM is no longer relevant because the international environment got changed. Now, why NAM was created? It was created during a bipolar kind of arrangement. And there was a bipolarism. One side there was capitalism, another side there was communism. When there is no capitalism, when there is no communism, and the world has entered into a unipolar kind of arrangement where capitalism and liberalism was the idea, then there was no point of talking about NAM now. So many critics said that. But there are certain people who supported NAM by saying that whether the world is unipolar, multipolar or bipolar, non-alignment as a foreign policy for the weaker countries or the small countries, would still remain valid. Why it will still remain valid? Because this policy will last as long as sovereign nation states exist. See, in international politics, the superior countries had a habit of showing their power over the smaller countries, or to capturing the resources of the smaller countries directly or indirectly or diplomatically or economically or politically. So there are many ways that possibly there could be extension of neo-colonialism by the superior powers. So unless and until we have a framework called NAM, it is very impossible for the smaller, weaker country to assert their demands in front of the global forums, or to oppose certain, steps of imperialism or neo-colonialism. Therefore, many people believe that NAM is not irrelevant. Rather, it has relevance for the smaller countries. Now, when you talk about the relevance of 21st century, we would, as I have said, that there are both positive sides and negative sides. Let us first talk about the positive sides. Why do we still consider that NAM could be still relevant? The first one is NAM's steadily growing membership. Now, if you look at the membership of NAM, it was very interesting that the membership of NAM has developed manifold. In the Belgrade Conference of 1961, the total members of NAM was only 25. Now, whereas if you look at the recent data, it was said that more than 120 countries were the direct members of NAM and 65 countries were the observer members of non-alignment movement. Interestingly, in the 2019 conference of NAM, altogether 165 countries have participated. So it shows that NAM is still popular actually. Although we say that after Cold War there is no relevance of NAM, but even after the Cold War it was noticed that there were many countries who have been participating in the conferences of NAM. So it shows that they were still trusting the organization called NAM. Secondly, success of post-Cold War NAM summit conferences. So it was noticed that, after the Cold War, there were several conferences that held, and most of these conferences in 21st century were mostly targeted the current global concerns. For example, after the incident of 9/11, non-alignment movement was quite vocal about the anti-terror policies. And they were quite vocal about issues like environmental sustainability. And recently, in the month of probably June, there was an online conference that held between the leaders of non-alignment movement, where all of them have discussed about, finding a cooperative way of resolving this COVID-19 pandemic, or to combating this COVID-19 pandemic from the world. So therefore, we cannot say that NAM is irrelevant. So as an organization, it still become relevant because it has been giving importance to many of the new global concerns. Not only that, non-alignment movement as an organization, it still works as a mouthpiece for the third world countries. Now, who are these third world countries? Third world countries basically comprise of those countries who are economically fragile, who have been always depending on the global economy, who have been still depending on the big countries for exporting, for export markets, loans, grants. So therefore, these third world countries need some organization who can speak on behalf of them. So therefore, it was said that the world was completely unequal, at least from a political and economic terms, because the powerful countries are politically also superior and also economically. So therefore, to maintain that equality, at the world affairs, we need some organization. So NAM had been playing that role of maintaining the the persuading the equality in the world affairs for these third world countries, especially for diplomatic resources of third world. The next one is NAM and the group of 77. It is very interesting to say that G77 is a particular organization which is mainly for the lower developed economies. Mostly it was noticed as for the G77 group of 77 countries, most of the members belonging to the NAM members. And according to the recent data, a total of 134 members are there in G77, and almost most of the countries who have been a member of G77 also the members of non-alignment movement. So therefore, this particular organization called G77 directly or indirectly had the background called non-alignment movement. Why it was created? It was created to sustain the agenda of NAM. Now it is very interesting to say that because of the G77 and their numerical strength, it played a very important role in the decision-making process of UN General Assembly and also the other forums and agencies of UN. Now here I would like to tell an example that in the certain meetings of United Nations Security Council, there's an example that this group of 77 G77 nation, they played a very important role. For example, as you all know that earlier in the United Nations Security Council, it was the Republic of China, Taiwan, who had the permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council, but the pressure created by G77, it has transferred to the mainland China. Now that is why it is said that G77 played a very important role. So indirectly it was the NAM who had played an important role in United Nations organizations. Not only that, the permanent membership of India in the United Nations Security Council was also been pressurized by these G77 countries. However, there were certain members of NAM who had also demanded who have also suggested for merging NAM into G77. That thought that NAM now it should merge into G77 because the issue of NAM is still irrelevant for them. However, there is another important reason why we can think that NAM is still relevant, because of creation of a new world order. It is noticed that the major thrust of NAM is to create a new world based on rational, democratic, equitable, and non-exploitative interstate relations. Now, why NAM is required? It was required so that we can develop interstate connections between the countries. So these interstate connections can be possibly be used through the matters of democratic, equitable, and non-exploitative rational relationship with the other countries. So why it is required? It was required so that a sense of new colonialism can be stopped, which has been imposed by various WTO round conferences. Then the relevance of non-alignment movement in 21st century was also put into question because of certain issues and problems within the NAM also. So there are certain reasons why do we believe, many people believe that NAM as a concept or as a movement or as an organization, it is not relevant. What were the reasons? Number one, there was a split in NAM. Even during the time of Cold War, when the NAM was created and it was fully functional, some of the members of NAM, they have split it into two parts and of two different opinions. One group that is consisted of countries like Afghanistan, Cuba, Ethiopia, Vietnam, they have challenged the very foundation of the movement by claiming that the very idea of alignment, non-alignment is not possible. And for the betterment of the economic conditions of these countries, they have suggested that to join the socialist camp. Whereas there is second category of group of countries, for example, Malaysia and Singapore, they have demanded that to fulfill the national interests or the interests of these countries, they should join the Western camp. So that two different or rival opinions regarding to aligning with any of the pools was also there. So that is another reason why we feel that the members of NAM, they were actually do not want to be in non-alignment for a long term. So therefore, this kind of split within the NAM actually weakened their ideological position. Secondly, the second problem within the NAM which made it irrelevant was the double standard. Now, why do we consider it as double standard? Because many of the members of non-alignment country, they have dual opinions or double standard in looking at USA and USSR. For example, many of the non-aligned states, they were willing to oppose the Western colonialism very promptly, but they were not been that much active regarding the brand of domination created by Soviet Union. So in one way they are opposing the Western colonialism, but the another way, the same way when the Soviet Union was trying to dominate, they were completely reluctant to put a question on it. So that kind of double standard was also there, which made the NAM most irrelevant. Then the failure of NAM summit. Although even after the Cold War, different summits were being held, and but the promises that were being made, the deliberation, the pronouncements, and the recommendations suggested by these conferences or summit meetings, these were failed to realize. So therefore, many people say that because NAM failed to keep their promises or to utilize the pronouncements, declarations, recommendations made by the summit. So it made the institution more like a rhetoric than as an action group of organization. So therefore, it is another important criticism. So whatever decision that has been made in the summit, those have not been utilized. Now, another important weakness of NAM is failure in establishment of NIEO. In the previous modules, we have already discussed about what is new international economic order. So within the gimmick of the changing political economy, these third world countries who have been considered as the lower developed countries or LDCs, those countries have suggested for a new international economic order. So that new international economic order was one of the demand for the non-alignment movement as an organization. But that NAM as an organization, that did not do much, or nothing significant have been done by NAM as an organization to achieve this NIEO. So that was another failure of NAM, which made it more irrelevant. And after the end of Cold War, the world has entered into a new phase of economy that is called globalization. And along with globalization, there are other two versions of liberalization, that is privatization and liberalization has also entered. So with this LPZ that comes up, liberalization, privatization and globalization, it created a severe strain and stress in front of these developing countries. So they are trying to adjust with the changing dynamics created by globalization. So it was very much impossible for them to look at a new international economic order, but to adjust with the changing economic orders. So with that, we have talked about these important concepts on India's and non-alignment movement. We have today talked about what was the role of India during Cold War and what is the connection between India and NAM, and why the NAM policy of Indian government had been criticized. Then we talked about the relevance of non-alignment movement in 21st century, and while talking about that, we have talked about both pros and cons of talking about the relevance of non-alignment movement. If you have any questions and queries, please feel free to write to me at susengfai@nlc.sc.in. You are watching your favorite channel, e-Politica. Thank you for watching, and if you like this module, then do comment, like and share among your friends and colleagues and with your students. And if you are new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. With that, I end up with this module. We would again meet with another module on political science with another important concept associated with this subject or another subject of political science. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Jai Hind. Thank you very much.